Good evening, dear friends. It's a momentous occasion, momentous day. I want to make a little announcement before we start, which is, I just want to introduce you, take a look here at the screen. This is our next course topic. Our next course coming up in the fall, after the holidays, is called Outsmarting Anti-Semitism, a 4-part course on the absurdity of anti-Semitism and how to beat it with purpose, positivity, and pride. Right? What does Judaism have to say about anti-Semitism? So it's going to be a very, very meaningful and a very powerful course, really going through what does Judaism say about anti-Semitism? How do we react and respond to anti-Semitism? This is going to be upcoming for this course. But let's jump in for today's course. And just, by the way, I just want to put it out there. I am looking for a sponsor for the next course. If any of you would be interested in sponsoring the next course, hey, Alan. Thank you. If any of you would be interested in sponsoring the course, please let me know. Okay, let's get the mic on. All right, should we get the mic on? Okay, there we go. Is that better? Okay. All right, let's do the mic. All right. So let us jump into today's class. We want to dedicate today's class on this course in loving memory of Zelika and Yetta Green and Martin and Judith Herman, dedicated by the children Alex and Barbara Green. Hello, Lotus. How are you? Hello, Mazel Tov. Okay. And here we are at lesson 4, titled Point and Counterpoint. And we're going to be tackling today one of the big topics that we were waiting to. It was a big hot button issue for this course, the phenomena of debate in Judaism. And it seems like in Judaism, there's so many different opinions for everything, and every rabbi has something else to say about everything. They say the joke that there was once a Jew who was looking for a new synagogue. It's called shtiebel hopping. You know what that means? A guy who doesn't really belong anywhere. He just hops between shtiebels. Shtiebel hopping. All right. You guys are familiar with the term shtiebels? What was that? Oh, you could do whatever you want. I'm not going to enforce anything. Okay. You each to their own. No. I mean, no pressure either way. All right. So there's a Jew looking for a new synagogue, and he's calling up every single synagogue in town. And he says, I'm looking for a synagogue which has a rabbi who only has one arm. One arm. I need a rabbi with just one arm. Every synagogue says, I'm sorry, maybe go look somewhere else. We don't offer that service, right? One of our services are not rabbi with one arm. And he's running around town looking for the one-armed rabbi. Someone asks him, what's wrong with you? What's this business? You want to find a rabbi with just one arm? So he says, listen, up until now, every single time I asked the rabbi a question, he'd give me an answer. And then he would start saying, but on the other hand, so I'm sick and tired of that. I just want a rabbi with just one arm. No, don't give me other hands. All right. Well, this is part of Judaism, that we debate a lot. And we want to understand how that works. We want to understand, there's a lot to understand because it's a deep question. All right. But in order to understand how debate works or doesn't work, we need to recap, because you cannot understand the concept of debate. There we go. All right. You cannot understand the concept of debate unless you have a sophisticated understanding of how Judaism works, which is indeed what we've been doing the past 3 classes. So I want to recap with you. We have the written Torah. The written Torah, scripture, the Bible, as we've discussed in lesson 1, is virtually incomprehensible on its own as a closed book. You don't really have any real system of law, of a religious system, or religious code just from the Torah. So therefore, we discussed we're dependent on something called the oral Torah, the oral tradition. Within the oral tradition, there are 4 categories. Let's recap. This is going to be very, very important. Category number 1 is called the received. Received means that the very first time when we as a Jewish people got to meet the Torah, Moses taught us interpretations. Moses taught us the verse, and Moses taught us on the spot what the meaning of the verse is. So an example of this is the Torah says, and you shall write these words on the doorposts of your home. What does that mean? It can mean, I don't know what. It can mean a lot of things. Moses taught us it means a mezuzah. You can take a scroll made out of parchment, you write these specific words on it, wrap, and then you put it on the right side of the door. Everything Moses taught us. That's the received. The second category of the oral tradition is called derived. This is the part of Torah where neither God and neither Moses, which means God didn't tell Moses this information, and God left it to us to figure out what the answer is based on whatever information we have already from the received. We have to derive the answers. That's the derived. Category number 3 is called legislated. These are already man-made. Received is God-made, is divine. Derived is also God's word. We call it the biblical law. Because God is the one who embedded the answers and left us hints to get to his answers to these questions. But legislated is already, as we spoke about last week, is already, how are you, Max? Legislated is already rabbis making up brand new laws which don't necessarily have a precedence. There's no biblical source to it, but they make it up as they see fit. That's legislated. And the fourth category of the oral tradition is what we call the customary. Customs initiated by the people. This is already not just man-made, but even rabbis don't make it up. How are you? Come on in. All right. All right. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Pam. Hello, Jeff. All right. We finally get to see you. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Mazel tov. Thank you. All right. So, customs initiated by the people throughout history. All right. Now, I just want to show you all of Judaism. How are you, Lance? All of Judaism is a tapestry of all four of these elements. And when you realize that Judaism is broken up into these four categories, you'll actually see virtually every single part of Judaism is a beautiful combination of all four of these. So I'll give you an example. Let's go to an iconic part of Judaism. Let's talk about the Seder. And I'll just go through with you. I'll show you that in the Passover Seder, we have a beautiful mix of all four of these categories of the oral tradition coming together. So let's go through it. I think some of these things will shock you, where they come from. All right, the Seder plate. The whole idea of taking a plate and putting these 6 items in this specific order, where does that come from? Is that from the Bible? Was that derived? Was that legislated? Is that a custom? Anyone want to guess? Custom, very good. Okay, this is a custom. All right, let's keep on going. That's a custom. Jews, by the way, why is it a custom? There is a lot of Kabbalistic meaning to this setup, but it's not law. You don't need to do it this way. But within Jewish mysticism, it speaks about this type of setup, these 6 items, and Jews took it upon themselves, and that became part of law because they took it upon themselves to do it in this specific way. All right, 4 cups of wine. Anyone want to guess? We drink 4 cups of wine. Where does that come from? I'll tell you that is legislated. The idea of drinking 4 cups in the time when we don't have a holy temple, that is legislated by the rabbis. Okay, reclining, that is legislated by the rabbis as well. These are legislations. All right, dipping a vegetable in salt water, part of the Seder, that's legislated. That's customary. That was legislated. All right. Okay, hiding the afikomen, this is customary. This is a custom Jews do. Retelling the story of the Exodus, making sure to do the story, that's received. That comes from the Torah. That's from day one we had that. The concept of the 4 sons, which really means the mitzvah, not just to tell the story, but to tailor the storytelling to each child's specific needs. What was that? You say legislated? It's derived. Our first derived for the Seder. We derive from the Torah that this is how you have to do the mitzvah. All right, washing hands before eating matzah. That's legislated. That's legislated. Eating matzah. Received. This is already from the Torah. This is received. The amount of matzah. You don't just eat matzah. You have to eat a certain amount of matzah, and that is received. From day one, Moses taught us how much matzah we have to eat. Eating Hillel sandwich, where we make a sandwich, we put matzah with the maror. Where does that come from? Legislated. The rabbis legislated we should do this. Eating an egg at the Seder, that's a custom, very good, customary. Filling Elijah's cup, that's a custom. All right, first of all, it's very interesting that we see at the Seder There's a lot more customs and legislations than biblical laws at play at the Seder. But this is the idea. Judaism is nonstop combining all four elements. And you can do this with every single mitzvah, with every single Jewish tradition. It's a beautiful tapestry of all four elements. All right, now this is going to be very important information as we go through today's class. But let's jump into debate. All right. Let us begin with an ethical question. All right. And we'll read an article. We'll read an article from the New York Times from 2011. All right. Let's pass around the microphone. Michael, we begin with you on page 112. And let us read this article and then we'll discuss it.
With their packs full, their canteens overflowing, and their reserve bottles filled to the brim, outdoorsy Arizona set out on foot this time of year under the scorching sun. But as they navigate these picturesque trails, they face not only physical challenges, but ethical ones. Like how much water to share with strangers who have miles to go and a drop to drink. The question comes up on South Mountain, an urban refuge in southern Phoenix, on a 4-mile hike down to Fossil Springs, a couple hours north, most definitely along the steep pathways of descent into the Grand Canyon. Wherever it is, hikers regularly encounter strangers gasping trailside for food. If it came down to having enough water for myself or helping someone, I'd have to drink my own water, said Laura Craig, a Phoenix businesswoman who shared some of her extra water with distressed strangers in a recent hike at Fossil Springs. It's an ethical decision. You hate to think of things like survival of the fittest, but it does come down to that. A hiker who had run out of water died in the Grand Canyon last weekend after some backpackers he had encountered, who were parched themselves, shared some of their water with him. The hiker continued on along, ignoring the strangers' entreaties for him to turn back towards the Colorado River, where hikers replenished their water supplies. If giving up water would endanger myself to the point that I would also become a casualty, I would not share. Rather, I would search for help before one unfortunate hiker turned into two. This kind of situation has happened before. Shannon D. Marquette, the spokeswoman at the Grand Canyon National Park, said park veterans recalled at least one case in which someone died trying to provide more help than they could physically afford to provide. Ms. Craig said that looking out for oneself first makes sense. It's just like in an airplane, the stewardess tells you to secure your own mask before you help people, she said. It sounds selfish, but it's right.
All right, so here we go. It sounds selfish, but it's right. You have water. You desperately need this water. Let's be blunt about this. You have 6 miles to hike. You did not bring a whole canteen to be able to be giving charity along the way, but you're meeting somebody who's in distress. Do you need to give? What's the Torah's law? Is there an obligation for you to give your water, putting your own life at risk, but you got to be there for a brother, right? Really, this is in the context of Jewish law, it'd be from a Jew to a Jew. So you need to risk your own life for another Jew who's in distress. Or do you say, I need this? I'm happy to give you charity, but not to put my own life on the line. So I wanna ask you your opinion. Who, by raise of hand, and if you're on Zoom, either raise your hand and give me a thumbs up, or there's a way to put an emoji or do a reaction. So I want to hear from you. Let's take a little vote. Who votes here that it sounds selfish, but it's right? Which means if you have a limited quantity of water, you need it, don't give it. I'm sorry, I need to live. Who votes that?
To a stranger?
To a stranger. But let's talk about a Jew, because in Jewish law, we generally speak from a Jew to a Jew. It's the and I'm not saying that you shouldn't give water to a non-Jew, but the obligation that you must do it is not as, it's already a different category. But let's just talk about it. You meet a stranger, you meet another Jew, but it's a stranger Jew, right? Do you need to give the water? So who says you don't give the water? You have to hold on to the water yourself. Let's take a little vote. All right, anybody on Zoom? All right, we have about 8 people over here who are voting, 9 people voting that. Thank you, Sheldon. You got the reactions right. Okay, very good. Somebody got it. All right, so we have 9 people who say, you're hiking, you need the water, someone else is in distress, too bad on him. I just can't. I cannot afford to risk my life. I can't give water. Okay, who votes the other way? Don't.
Take a middle ground. I would make a judgment. I think I could probably make it.
You make a judgment I'll give you a certain amount of water. I think I can make it, even though it's not ideal, I could find a way. But the question is, what is right? What is wrong? So right could be you need to make such an, you can't just be flippant and say, go take a hike. I can't help you. You need to give something at least, okay? So you would say that there's no such thing as turning your back on such a situation, right? Okay, I think that's fair. Meaning, I'm not agreeing with you. I'm just saying that. I think that would fit into this position. So who says you got to give water? By raise of hands. Let's take some hands over here. All right. Two. Anyone else over here? Debbie, I don't think you voted for anything. You voted for this?
I had my hand halfway up for the first one.
Oh, and then this one
Because I was not sure.
you're not sure. It's a tough one.
I didn't vote.
You didn't vote. I know. I saw that. You abstained. Okay. All right. So we have over here an ethical debate, 9-6. Not everybody voted. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. So we have here an ethical debate. Do you have to share water? Do you not have to share water? And we just took a little vote on that. Let me ask you a question. Does it surprise you that we have different opinions here in this room, including the virtual room? Is it surprising that people? No. It's not surprising at all. Everybody is entitled to their own opinions. And we all have different experiences, we all have different dispositions, and we all think differently. That's human nature. And in every area of life, I wouldn't call it debate, it's just different views. We think differently about stuff. We think differently about what color paint we want our bedroom to be painted. And we think also differently about ethical questions. What is the moral and right thing to do? That's fair. All right. Will it surprise you if I told you that the rabbis debated this in the Talmud? No, right? It makes perfect sense. It's a great question for rabbis to debate. And rabbis debate everything, right? That's the stereotype. The Rebbe once said the Rebbe said this as a humorous remark. What's the Jewish greeting? How do you greet another Jew? What's the traditional? Shalom. Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, which means peace upon you. But till today, that's the traditional Jewish. Shalom Aleichem. How are you doing? Shalom Aleichem. What is the response to that greeting? Aleichem Shalom. Same words, but just in reverse. So the Rebbe said that's the nature of a Jew. You say this way, I say the opposite. You say Shalom Aleichem, I say Aleichem Shalom. That's how Jews are. My grandfather was a very sharp Jew. He was a brilliant guy, and people used to ask him his opinion a lot. But he was Russian. He was very tough. Alex, I say this with love. Don't worry, I'm also Russian. I'm Russian through and through. But he was very opinionated. So he had a line sometimes. People would ask him his opinion, and he would say jokingly, he would say in Yiddish, "Zog mir, ich will sagen verkehrt." You tell me what you think, and I'll say the opposite. So rabbis are debating, should you give water, should you not give water? Rabbis debate this. All right. So the Talmud. Is there something wrong with that? Is there anything problematic with the fact that rabbis are debating such a question? Or is that okay? I want you to think about this question. Is there anything problematic, fundamentally problematic, with the fact that rabbis are debating such a question or not? What do you say?
I would say there's nothing wrong with the fact that they're debating it. I think when it becomes prescriptive, that becomes questionable. When
it becomes prescriptive, it becomes questionable. Why? Explain yourself.
Because I didn't vote either, because I think I can tell you what I would do right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
When my feet are on the ground in that situation is when I would have to make a decision.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is that when you're academic about something, it's very easy to reach a conclusion or at least to debate it. But once you're in the situation itself, you have more data, you have more emotion, you have more.
Okay, I hear you. So Alan is saying that it's very easy to talk about things on a theoretical basis, but when push comes to shove, that's when you'll make the choice. But Judaism is not giving a recommendation. When the rabbis are debating this, they're asking about law, obligation. Do you have an obligation? I don't care what you like or what you feel or what suits you right now. Do you have an obligation to give water and die? By the way, we're going to read soon this piece of Talmud. It means you're going to die, but die. Give water. That's one opinion. Give water and you'll both die, but you gave your water. You didn't turn your back on a Jew and you died for it. Well, good for you. Or there's another opinion. No, you got to live. Help your brother, but not if you're going to die. This is about law. Is it binding? So it is binding. It is prescriptive. It is. So it's not about recommendation. It's not about theoretically what's the ethical thing to do. What's Jewish law? Could you be called to a court of law? You didn't give water. Somebody died because of you. But I would have died also. But you didn't give water. Who cares? You should die as well. It's a question. You could be right. It's law. Okay, but let's go back to our question. Is there fundamentally anything problematic with the fact that rabbis are debating such questions in the Talmud?
I would argue the opposite, that it's beneficial that they're debating, because you can only get the best answer with a diverse set of opinions and fleshing them out.
Oh, so sometimes debating is very good because it gives you the full gamut of different perspectives on an issue, and then you have the clarity to understand all the different perspectives, and then you can make a decision. I want to get here to a point, but go ahead. Yeah.
Is the answer that this should be higher than the legislative? Because, I mean, this almost sounds like something that should be derived rather than legislative.
Okay, very interesting. So I know you're mid-sentence, but I want to already say what you're saying so that everybody could hear. Max is saying this seems to be something that should not be legislated. It should probably be coming from the category of derived, which means God should be having an opinion on this. This shouldn't be something rabbis have to figure out later on in history. God should have an opinion, should you give water or not? Okay, so keep on going. And if so, or was it just?
Well, no, and I mean, I'm sitting here debating it myself. I know that the one thing you're not allowed to do, even in counting your own, is to kill another.
Right.
So you have to look at that and maybe derive from that you've got to give the water.
Yeah.
Even at the pain of death. I keep.
Okay. So you're still toying with the original question. So here's what I want you to think about. When we study Talmud and we see rabbis debating, what's the nature of this debate? Are they just sitting back? You know, some people have this imagery. What are rabbis debating? They're a bunch of intellectuals sitting back on their sofas, smoking cigars, and throwing out opinions. I think this and I think that, and everybody gets to have their opinions. So if the rabbis are giving opinions, their own personal opinions, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with the fact, or there's nothing suspicious about the fact that rabbis have different opinions. They're all smart people, and they could all think different things about ethical questions. So if we regard Talmudic sages as expressing their own views, nothing is wrong. Did I just say that properly? All right, thank you. About Talmudic debates, everybody is, okay, but here's the point. When we study Talmud, when we study Jewish law, we don't just look at it as human opinions. In the Jewish view, we study Talmud because this is the word of God. This is divine. If you want to know what humans have to say about these types of questions, you can go read United States law. You could go read, you could study all different countries' laws. So that's human law. The uniqueness of studying Talmud is you're studying what God has to say about an issue. And that's where we get to this question. But if we regard the Talmudic sages as those who teach us what God desires, then Talmudic debate seems inappropriate. I don't want to know what you have to say about giving water or not. What does God say? Does God say I have to give water or not? And if you're debating it, that seems to imply that we don't know what God has to say about it. You do derive, but even when we derive something, we pin it on God. We say, this is God's thing. This is God's teachings.
Who's the we? If I read this tractate, it says A, over here it says this. That's why.
So we went through in depth the process of derivation, and it's not a free-for-all. There's a system. There's 13 tools of derivation, and you have to stick within a framework. God wrote the laws, and God embedded all the answers to all the questions there. But this is the big idea. Are we debating fact, or is it just opinions? And it seems that if rabbis debate everything, that means we don't know what God has to say about it. If we don't know what God has to say about it, then why should we give any real holy or religious significance and value to what rabbis have to say if they're just giving opinions? And you should know this is one of the pieces of evidence, I'll get to your question in a moment, that is used to say that, all Judaism is up to personal opinion. Rabbis can't figure anything out. Rabbis don't know anything. Everything is up for debate. So obviously it doesn't come from God. It's human opinion. And if they have an opinion, I can also have an opinion. Rabbi this said A, Rabbi B said B. I say C. I think Dennis Prager says this. Rabbis have their opinions. I also have my opinions. I also have opinions about Judaism. My opinion is just as valid as the sages' opinions, which takes away any seriousness, any legitimacy of what we would call the halachic system, the system of Jewish law. You know, who cares what rabbis had to say 1,500 years ago about ethical questions? You know, we've made a long way since then. Let's get some new opinions. So we really want to understand, how does the phenomena, the reality of machlokas, of debate, fit in within the Jewish tradition? How could it still be divine if everything is up for debate? Right? What does God have to say? Does God say A or does God say B? Let's put that up over here, right? Does God say A or does God say B? Seemingly, it shouldn't be up for debate. If it's opinions, we could debate it. But if it's a fact, what did God say? Does God say give water, not give water? God can't say both. Give water and don't give water. Right? That doesn't make much sense. Then it seems it's not from God. So this is where we see why we have to understand debates. And these are going to be, I want to lay out over here 4 questions that we're going to tackle in the rest of today's class. And you have this in your books on page 114, but I'll put it up over here as well. These are going to be the driving questions for tonight's class. Number 1, why don't the Talmudic debates undermine the validity of the entire halachic system? If everything is up for debate, that seems we don't know anything. That seems we don't have any tradition what God has to say about any of this stuff. Seems that none of this should be binding. You know, what value is there to this? Number 2, which is already the key to the answer, which areas of Jewish law are subject to debate and difference of opinion? This is an advanced way of thinking about it. Where do you find debates? Where not? Number 3, why is there even disagreement? Why would God want and or allow such a system of disagreements? And number 4, how are debates resolved? So we have to really understand and get a sophisticated understanding of the phenomena of debates in Judaism and Jewish law. Let us jump in. The first step of understanding debates in Judaism is, let me make sure I've seen questions over here. Okay, Noah's asking a very good question. There's this concept, there's 2 different pairs of tefillin. There's the Rashi tefillin, Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. We're not going to get into that now. But that seems that we have, again, even what type of tefillin to put on, there seems to be debates. All right, good question. The first step of understanding what the phenomena of debates are is, before we even explain it, but is to categorize it. At this point, we all here in this room and here in the Zoom room collectively have a very deep understanding of Jewish tradition. Most people don't understand that there's nuance in Jewish tradition. Jewish tradition, right? Like what they say, tradition, right? One big tradition. But here we have no, tradition, there's different types of traditions. There's the received tradition. There's the derived tradition. There's the legislated. So now we have a template. We have to work with when we talk about debates. And the first step, which clarifies the entire conversation about debates, is to figure out and to split Judaism into these 4 categories, and then to figure out where are their debates. And we have to be conscious of this. Take a look at page 115 in your books. I want you to think about it. Let's take a moment, and then I want to hear your opinions. There are 4 categories of the divine of Jewish law: received, derived, legislated, customary. But let's think now, just using your own logic and based on what we've spoken about over the past 3 weeks, where in each category, how strong is the likelihood for debate in all these 4 categories? What do you say? I'm going to think a moment. 1 means it's less likely, 5 means very likely for there to be debates. Let's already categorize where we think we could find debate over here. All right? Let's take a moment. Yes?
Are we supposed to be answering yet? Or?
Not yet. Let's take it 1 step at a time. And in a moment, we'll go through it. All right, just think of this. Received, derived, legislated, customary, give it a number. How likely you think it is for. And I want you to try to think of a reason. Why do you think there would be a lot of debates or not a lot of debates? All right, let's start getting some thoughts. Okay, received. Let's first take a vote. What number? And if you're on Zoom, just hold up, either chat it or hold up your hand and give me Give me a number. From 1 to 5, how likely do you think there should be debates in the category of received oral law? We have a 1, we have a 1, we have a 1. 3 ones. We got another. That's that a 2? A 2. Okay, Jeff is, and a few ones. And let's get to Zoom over here. We have a few ones. Ones. Okay. All of you seem to be pretty in a 2. David is giving us a 2. Thank you, David. You're giving a 5 for received, very likely for there to be debates. Okay. Now, let me hear from you. Most of you, we'll get to Michael in a moment, most of you seem to feel that received is not very likely for there to be debates there. Why not? All right, does somebody want to answer? Why not? What was that? Because it's God-given.
Of course, explicit.
It's more explicit. We know, tell me if this is what you mean. We knew from day one exactly what to do. So there's not, meaning from day one, a mezuzah looked like a mezuzah. No, right? So there's not a lot of room for debate about that. So it seems it should be a 1. Does everybody agree with that assessment? That received, logically, it would seem that there's not a lot of room, there's not a lot of wiggle room for a lot of debate. Let's get to Michael. What do you say?
I said we received the least amount of detail. So we have to debate, for example, as we covered there.
Oh, okay.
Milk and meat,
But that's derived already.
but you had to debate it to derive it.
But that's already 2. So you're saying there's a lot of room for debate in derived, which means what Moses did not tell us, the empty boxes, that's where we have to debate a lot to figure out what the answer is. Okay, but let's go to what Moses did tell us. The facts Moses did tell us. What do you say then? What number would you give it then? 4. So still very likely for debate. And what's your rationale? Why should there be a lot of debate?
I think as we layer more information on it, we have less to argue about. Start at a very broad sense. Add to each level.
So you're saying add the received, it's too vague. So there's more room for debate. Okay. I'm not sure I fully agree with that, or I'm not sure I'm fully seeing your argument, but we'll get to that soon. Let's move on to derived. Derived, give me a number. So the law is that we have to figure out using God's tools of derivation. We already had to use these logical mechanisms to figure out what would be the answer to unknown scenarios. God never told us explicitly. What number would you give over here for the likelihood of debate? Max giving us a 4. Anyone here on Zoom? A 4, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 2, a 4. Okay, 4, 3. And what was that, Lance? 3. Okay, but everybody's upping the game already over here. 5, and what was that, Debbie? A 3? You're giving us a 3. Everybody is upping the game with derived, and you're saying there's more likelihood for debates. Why would you say there's more likelihood for debate? Let's get a volunteer. Yes, Stuart?
I think that derived allows for not only a lot of interpretation, but unlike legislative and customary, there's a lot more on the line, and a lot more at stake, a lot more scrutiny, a lot less inclination to accede to what might strike someone at least at first blush as a plausible argument. I think because you have to derive so much from this, as the years go on, there's so many things to interpret, so many different perspectives, and so much in the line. These are going to be more hotbeds of debate.
Okay, very good. So first of all, you're saying 2 different things. Number one, you're saying that already over here, there's a lot of room for human ingenuity. We have to already start deriving and extrapolating. So that already automatically opens up the opportunity for different people to derive different things different ways and to apply different laws this way or that way, or to derive different conclusions from 2 different places. And then you say something else, that because it's so, what does God have to say about trying to derive something? It's a very serious issue, so it could be hotly debated. Okay, very good. So you're saying there's a much stronger chance you put up a 5. You made all the way to the top. Yes, Max.
So I thought that, once you derive, even in complete good faith and everything else, there's an opportunity for other people to look at how you're deriving the law and saying your derivation is correct, or your derivation is wrong. You should be this cool rather than this.
Very good. So very good. So what you're saying is, I'll get to you in a moment, Beth. What Max is saying is that the moment someone says something is received, it's a closed case. You're telling me that you received like this. Okay, there's nothing to argue about, right? Because it's not a logical argument. It's just telling me the facts. You received this from Moses. Okay, I'm not going to argue on that. But the moment you're using a logical tool, somebody else could come and scrutinize. Did you use the tool properly? Could you maybe have used a different tool of derivation to come to a different conclusion? And in fact, that's exactly what happens in the Talmud. So yes, you're saying that there is a lot more room for debate. Beth, you had a question? Go ahead and unmute if you did. No problem.
Oh, there. I think I was going to say something similar to what you just said, depending on where the derivation comes from. Is it being derived from something that's already been debated and you just have a different opinion? Or is it, are you deriving this from just an opinion, or is there a precedent? Is there something that's already been discussed? Is there a decision that has been made that you may or may not agree? Where is it being derived from? Would give me plenty of room for debate. Where is this derived from?
Very good point. Okay, so we did discuss in lesson 2 that there's a very specific model how we derive stuff. It's not a free-for-all. It's not just I think this, I think that. God gave us 13 tools of derivation, and we have to work within that framework, which means that this category derived is not about opinions, right? That's what Stuart said. This is not about inclination. What do I think the answer should be? This part is all about figuring out what the answer would be based on the information we have already from God. But opinions are not part of derivation. You could actually say that legislated is more opinions. Rabbi get to think, what should we do to tackle a certain issue? If it's a societal issue or religious issue. But in derived, we are purely looking at what God told us and trying to apply that to a certain case. Okay, so we got a bunch of ideas over here. Derived seems to be more open for debate. Legislated, let's get a number. What do you guys say? Big 5. All right, Max is giving us a very enthusiastic 5. We got a 3, another 5. Let's get some more numbers. We're getting a 4. Anyone else? 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's get some of the 3s. Jeff, what do you say? Why? So you're saying it's open for debate, but not fully open for debate. What do you say?
Because it starts off even just from its beginning, not coming directly from Torah, but thinking sort of extrapolating the course as this, and we're interpreting it in this way, but sometimes we need to make a fence around the Torah, make sure that the laws, we're not even coming close to violating anything, so let's add some things that we know God may not have intended directly, but let's figure out what will keep us on the right track.
Right.
So that opens itself up to more kind of open thinking.
There's more creativity. Yeah, very good. Which means rabbis and sages and leaders throughout the ages have to figure out, as you said, how to put a fence around the Torah to deal with certain issues. But how you do that and what areas you think are problematic is very up to personal opinion. In the area of legislated, it's very opinion-based. What do rabbis think the community needs? And to your point, it's creative. One rabbi could think this is a good idea. Another rabbi would say that's actually a really bad idea. I would say we should do something else. Or another rabbi would say, I don't even see an issue over here. You're making this into an issue. I don't see an issue. So right, to your point, it's a little bit more, but you're only giving it a 3. I'm wondering why you're not going all the way for a 5. All right. But does everybody agree with Jeff's point over here? Legislature seems like there's more room for people to have their own opinions. Okay. And number 4, let's go to number 4, customary. What do you say about customary? Open for debate, open for differences of opinion. 1, we're going down here. 1, 5. Why 1? Let's first go to let's go to the extremes. Why 1? Lance, what do you say?
If it's a custom, hey, in my family, the custom at the Seder is Uncle Joe hides the after every year in the same place. That's our custom.
So you're saying it's not open for debate?
Right, there's no debate.
No, but let's say that's not the custom in my family.
Okay.
Oh, okay, but here we have difference of opinion.
But we're not debating it.
So you're right, not debating, but so let's say difference of opinion. You're right. You're right. You're actually right. It's not a debate. It's just differences of opinion. It's meaning there is a certain variety or diversity. That's the word within Judaism. Is there a lot of diversity within the realm of customs? What would you say? It's not debate. You're right. It's not up for debate, which means if you're a custom, you're a custom.
U.S. custom, Israel custom.
Right, but I think that means that we're all agreeing, really. We're not debating, but there's a lot of variety, is it?
I think that it's not open for debate, because let's talk about customs that are essentially universal.
Oh, there are many customs which are universal, yes,
Like the Seder plate.
right.
That would be something that is self-evident. No one's gonna say there's people aren't using Seder plates. It's not a debate. It's a matter of what is organic and exists.
Right.
It is right in front of your, right in front of your,
It's part of the tradition, right? It's just,
right in front of your eyes, so you debate.
right.
It's there, not there.
So you're saying there's so many customs which are universal and just part of the fabric of Judaism, and it's just there. This is Judaism.
It's not there to see. It's not a custom.
Right.
You know,
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, Jeff.
I would say that's true once the custom is fully established and has been around for a long time, and everybody sort of agrees with it. But I can imagine that at the beginning, there was a lot of debate about a Seder plate, and how to do it, and do we need it?
Very good point, Jeff.
So the things can become established after.
Which means at this point, it's already standardized.
it's not a custom. So it's not even shows up on the radar. It's only when.
But it was, meaning at the beginning of time, Jews did not use a Seder plate.
Yeah.
At a certain point, Jews took it upon themselves. This is a nice thing to do. But that's a custom. The question is that close for debate? One day it just became a Seder plate. No one argued. No one's allowed to do. Or was it possible? Here's what I'm trying. Was it possible? I'll get to you in a moment, Max. Was it possible that the community of Tiberias used Seder plates, and the community of Hebron did not use Seder plates? Was that possible?
Yeah.
Initially, yeah, okay. So that's the idea. Till today, there are certain Jews. Let's talk about the Seder because we're using that a lot. Certain Jewish communities have the custom at the Seder. You wear a white garment, like a kittel, like the same what you wear on Yom Kippur. But that's not a universal Jewish custom. In Chabad, for example, we don't do that. Why not? Just not part of our customs. So we don't debate it, to Lance's point, right? Your custom's your custom, our custom's our custom. We're not going to debate this. Nothing to debate over here. But there is differences of opinion. There's variety within Judaism. So the answer is there is variety, but we won't call it a debate. I think that's a very good point, Lance. Yes, Max.
I was making a.
And you have a mic, so you might as well use it. It's like that. Everyone here on Zoom can be fully.
I was going to make a similar point that the stakes are somewhat lower. That if the Ashkenazis have this custom and the Sephardim have this custom, it isn't as destructive to Judaism as it might be some legislation or even worse, some derivation.
The stakes are not as high. It's just a custom. Okay, big deal. So the Jews of this community did this, and it's not a big deal. But on the other hand, that's because you and we all have a sophisticated understanding that not everything in Judaism is equal. There's customs, there's legislated, there's biblical, there's received. So we understand now that we could categorize and put this in the category of customary. So this debate, it's not that big of a deal. We can figure, it doesn't shake the very foundations of Jewish faith. One more point, and then we have to move on. Yes, Jeff.
Question, is it always clear whether something is customary or might be legislated? For example, as was said, Sephardim believe certain things are based on the Ashkenazim won't.
Mhm.
Is that's custom, but has it become really halacha?
Very good question. Is it always clear what is a custom and what is legislated? Very good question. The answer is yes. Jewish law will always tell you where something comes from. And that's part of the beauty of studying Jewish law, is that you get that clarity. It will tell you. The verse says like this: Moses taught us, which means we received from Moses this. The sages derived this. The sages legislated this. Jews, it's customary to do this. Now, but at a certain point, let's talk about the Seder plate. The moment a custom becomes widespread enough, then it becomes part of Jewish law and it becomes binding. And Jewish law will say this is law now, but it will attribute the source of the law to a custom, not to a legislation. Because who made this up? Did the rabbis make it up or did the people make it up? If the rabbis made it up, it's legislation. If it's custom, people. Okay. So this is very good. We got a lot of good discussion over here. And okay, we'll have to try to fit in the rest of the class over here, but this was very good discussion over here. And what we need, this is so important to be conscious of. There's different categories. When you find debate in Torah, we have to ask ourselves, what part of Torah is this? And where is there debate? Where is there not debate? Maimonides, today's class, we're going to be focusing a lot on what Maimonides has to say. Maimonides says that the biggest reason why people get confused with debate in Judaism is because they don't have clarity about the different categories. Maimonides walks us through the different categories. First is received. Maimonides says unequivocally, you will not find a single debate in all of Judaism over a received law. For example, the received law. If Moses told us something, you will never ever find a dissenting opinion. Let me give you an example. The Torah says on the holiday of Sukkot, take a fruit from a beautiful tree. Or I'm already giving interpretation. Fruit, tree, beautiful. All right, those are the three words. Fruit, tree, beautiful. Do you have any clue what to take on Sukkot? No, because any fruit could be beautiful. I don't know. All right. Moses told us this when the Torah says pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of a tree which is hadar. Hadar means beautiful. Fruit of a tree which is hadar. Moses told us that means a very specific, unique citrus fruit that is native to southern Italy. You won't find it anywhere else. That's what we take on Sukkot. Do you find any debate about that in Jewish history? Was there ever a community that said, no, our tradition is we take a dragon fruit? We take a dragon. You'll not find that. Because received is fact. That was part of Judaism from day one. Moses told us something. There's never debate about that. Let us read text 2a from Maimonides. Go ahead, Michael. Max, let's read this text. And by the way, these texts are very fundamental. All the texts we're going to be reading.
There are no debates at all with regard to the explanations we received from Moses. There never has arisen a debate among the sages of any era, from Moses until Rav Ashi, who redacted the Talmud, in which one sage said, an eye for an eye means literal retaliation, and another sage said the Torah is only referring to monetary compensation. Likewise, there never arose a dispute over the meaning of the verse, on the first day you shall take the fruit of a hadar tree, whereby one sage said that this fruit was an etrog, and another said that it referred to a quince, a pomegranate, or some other fruit. Nor have we come across any disagreement whether anuf, it's a vote, refers to myrtle branches.
All right. There's no debate because all this stuff comes from Moses and it's not up for debate. And let's put this up over here, a very important premise. There never arose a dispute over the meaning of the verse. The first is take the fruit of a hadar tree. Moses told us what it is, and ever since then, that's our tradition. Till today, you will not find a single Jew who fulfills the mitzvah of lulav and etrog and doesn't have an etrog and says this is Judaism. Maybe they don't know, that's something else. But nobody will say there's a different tradition. Oh, in my family, we do it. It's just impossible. This is fact. And here's actually something very interesting. This is a coin they found in Israel from the era of Bar Kokhba, the 2nd century of the Common Era. And it depicts a lulav and an etrog. It has the unmistakable shape, the very unique shape of an etrog. So this is like, some type of proof. 2,000 years ago, this is what Jews were doing. But this is the idea. Received was never argued, was never debated. If somebody forgot it, you could forget something. Then you go and ask somebody who remembers. But this is a matter of fact. It's not a matter of opinion. What did Moses tell us? That is law. That's the reality. The only conceivable way, let's just think about it. The only conceivable way that there could be a debate about a received law is if a sage forgot the law, claims to have remembered it, and will debate somebody who does remember. You understand? That's the only conceivable way a matter of a received law could be debated. A sage forgot it, falsely claims that he remembers it, and even has the audacity to argue with somebody who says, I do remember it. Some people think that's what happened. There's a misconception which comes from a lack of understanding the science of Judaism, the system of Judaism. People think that all Jewish tradition got forgotten. I've heard this before. People think all Jewish tradition got forgotten. So the sages of Talmud had to kind of figure it out again and argue about it and kind of reassemble Judaism from all the forgotten bits and pieces, which is why everybody's arguing about something. Maimonides says, no, that's not true. That's a total misconception. God forbid, and it's plain ignorance. Maimonides says, if you think that matters of Judaism were forgotten and that's why they're debated, Maimonides says, you probably have never studied Talmud before. That's what Maimonides says. Let's read text 2b from Maimonides. It's a sharp piece. Maimonides, by the way, had a very sharp pen. He knew how to write sharp. You see over here a little bit of his edge over here. So let's see what Maimonides says. Text 2b, page 117.
It would be very strange and disgraceful for a person to think that Talmudic disagreements are not laws received from Moses, and debates ensue deafness or error. Where one person's tradition is not received from trial, not study sufficiently from teachers. This view is incorrect and inconsistent. It slurs the people from whom receive the Torah and it amounts to them to talk. What brings people to believe such faulty ideas is that they are insufficiently versed in the words of the Talmudic sages. They therefore fail to draw a distinction between these explanations that we receive from Moses and the laws of the sages derived from analysis.
Right, this is not a simple matter. If you're going to claim that all Judaism was forgotten and we're debating forgotten laws, it calls into question the legitimacy of all of Jewish tradition. Maimonides says that is never an argument in the Talmud. If a sage forgot something, you see in the Talmud, they come clean. To claim about the Talmudic sages that they would forget something, not come clean about the fact that they don't remember this, and even argue about it with a sage who does remember it, Maimonides says two things. Number one, it slurs the sages. And number two, you've never studied it in Talmud before. If you would study the Talmud, you would see how much care and precision is taken that every single law is documented properly. These were people who gave their entire life to preserve and to transmit the Torah through the generations. It just doesn't fit with the Talmud. And only somebody who's never studied Talmud can even make such an argument that Talmud is up for debate because things were forgotten. If something comes from Moses, there's no debate about it. If you don't know what it is, you say, I don't know. And by the way, there's a very famous story in the Talmud. Very famous story. I don't know how famous it is. But there's a story. Without getting into all the details, the leaders of the community of Israel, the children of Becerra, these were the big mockers. They were high up in the aristocrats of the Jewish community. The leadership of Israel, they forgot a law. There's a certain law that only occurs every few years. It's a very difficult law about the day before Passover that falls out on a Shabbat. The children of Becerra forgot the law. It was coming a year where the day before Passover was a Shabbat. All the laws about the sacrifices, how do you deal with that with Shabbat? They forgot the laws. So they put out an announcement. Does anyone remember the law? Does anyone have a tradition what the law is? And there was a young sage. His name was Hillel. Wasn't as well known then as we know him today. And he was a little, as we say in I think it's maybe Russian, he was a little tutsuk. You know what tutsuk means? He was like a little kid, a little young guy. Young scholar. He comes from Babylonia. And in general, the Israeli scholars look down at the Babylonian scholars. Oh, we're the Israeli scholars. We have the authentic model of Jew. Yeah, you got the Babylonian stuff. So he was a Babylonian scholar, but he said, I studied in the yeshiva of Shmaya and Avtalion, the previous generations of sages, of leaders. And I know the tradition. And the children of Becerra had the humility to invite Hillel in to teach them the tradition. And they made him the Nasi, the leader of the Sanhedrin. That's when he got promoted and became a leader. But you see over there a model of there's a lot of transparency and honesty. You should know the words I don't know is found quite frequently in Judaic writings. If you don't know something, you write, I don't know. It's okay. You don't know, go find an answer. This is, in Judaism generally, there's a very big emphasis on remembering things. But if you forgot something, it wasn't a big deal. There's courts of law all over the cities. And then if everybody forgot something, go to the Sanhedrin. If you figure it out, there's a model for this. But here's the idea. Something which is received, there's never debates. But Maimonides will say, but there are debates in the other areas. So received, very big no. This is a very big important premise because there's never debate about fact. Something that God told us clearly is never debated upon in Judaism. I dare you to find even one such debate. Can't find it. And if you think you did find this, because you just misunderstand exactly what the Talmud is doing. As I'll give you an example of that in a moment. But once you're going to get to Derived, Maimonides says, yes, sometimes there will be debates. Legislative, yes, sometimes there will be debates. And customary also, there could be debates or differences of opinion, to the last point. Not debates, but different diversity within Judaism. But you'll never find a single diversity or a single debate when it comes to the received law. The moment it comes to Derived, there could be debates. That's okay. Let's give you let's give an example of that. Yes, Jeff.
But when it says, it seems very clear, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It seems that would start.
Okay, so Jeff is saying a good point, which is case in point. The Torah says an eye for an eye. And I see someone has a question over here on Zoom. 1 moment. The Torah says eye for an eye. Literally, that means, it sounds like if one person blunts out one person's eye, what do? Do the same, blunt out another eye. The offender's eye also has to be pulled out. But there was never debate about that. You know why? Because from day one, Moses told us it does not mean literal. It means monetary compensation. That's why it's never for debate. If Moses didn't interpret it for us, then everybody could debate it. I think it means literally. I think it means figuratively. Got to give money. But because it's received, there's never a single debate, which is true. You'll never find on a record a single debate in Judaism about the meaning of an eye to an eye, which is case in point. Someone has a question over here? And by the way, we're going to have to limit a little bit the questions because then we can get through this entire model without going totally over time. Yeah, you could do that. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm very confused.
Michael's confused. Okay, no problem.
If the receive was all we needed and there was understood completely, why would we need to debate? I mean, isn't the whole derived a debate over the interpretation?
No, we're not debating interpretation. We're debating over what we don't know, what was never told to us. I'll give you an example for that, but that's very important. Good point. Derived is never debating received. We are only debating what was never told to us, which means we were always in the dark about this. Here's an example. Let's go back to our opening point, to our opening question in the class. The Torah says you should save a life. The Torah says you should save a life. We all know that. It's a Jewish value. It's a mitzvah, save a life. If you watch somebody in danger, it's a mitzvah to go help them. But the Torah does not tell you if you have to do it, even if it means put your life on the line. We don't know the answer. And that's where we need derived. We don't know. You're in the desert, you have a minimum quantity of water, and you see another Jew in distress. There's a mitzvah to help that other Jew. But what about if you're going to die? So the sages have to derive this. We're going to see in a second, but they have to derive it. That's what sages do. Sages are not sitting back and saying, I think this and I think that, and you have your opinion, I mean your opinion. No, we want to know what God has to say about it. God gave us a toolbox, 13 derivations. That's category number 2, the derived. So what do the rabbis do? They look in the Torah, try finding hints that there is a hidden law over here, right? We got to dig here. And they apply a certain rule of derivation. Let's read the verses that the rabbis pinpoint is the clue to what the law should be in such a case. All right, so we're going to get a little bit of an understanding how the derived works, and we'll see how a debate happens over here. Where are we holding? Stuart? All right, go ahead. Text 3A, page 119. 3A, you got that?
When your brother becomes destitute and his hand falters beside him, you shall support him, whether a convert or a resident. So live with you. Shall not take interest from him. Fear your God and let your brother live with you.
All right, the context of these verses are about financial support. If a Jew is in financial distress, help them out, give them a loan, and don't charge interest, right? Hebrew free loans. Okay. This is the biblical source. See, that's the problem. Today we leave everything for organizations. Others, Hebrew free loan, you get it from there. The mitzvah is that you should give the loan. Today we're very good at that. We make big organizations, we make big buildings, and then leave me alone. Go to the big building. All right. That's the problem of the modern age. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time. All right, that was a rant. End rant. All right. Here's the verse. But if you look at these words, analyze these words carefully, you will realize something which is a great clue that the Torah is leaving you a big piece of information under the surface. There's a redundancy over here. There's 2 verses here. Each one's in a separate paragraph. The first paragraph of this text concludes, so that he can live with you. The next verse concludes, and let your brother live with you. That's a redundancy. The Torah is telling us twice in a row, let your brother live with you. But you just told us that. So a redundancy is one of the times when there is the opportunity for derivation. And without going into the whole system of how this derivation works, The point is these words, and let your brother live with you. Let's put this up over here on the board. On the board, let your brother live with you is the biblical hint for what you should do in the case of should you put your life on the line for another Jew, or is the obligation to help another Jew, does that end when you're already compromising your own safety? Does anybody want to share? Where do we see from these words that you should, what to do? Do these words resolve our question? Should you give water or not give water? What do you say? Anyone?
When I was gonna go with to live, or you have to let your brother live, and you have to live also.
Oh, so explain yourself. So what would that mean? Give water or not give water?
Well, that's where I couldn't figure it out.
Oh, okay. So let's think about it. Let your brother live with you. And for those of you on Zoom, feel free to answer as well. Unmute yourself. What does this tell you to do? Give water or not give water? What do you say?
Share the water?
If you share the water, one of you you're both going to die. If you have extra water, it's not even a question. Of course, you got to give the water. We're talking about a case where if you give water, you're going to die.
Everyone.
Give
Okay,
water.
you'll die. That's not enough water to walk 6 miles, or even a day and a half. You got to walk for another day and a half.
Give water.
What do you say?
Give water.
Give water. Where do you see that in this verse?
Let your brother live.
Oh, you got to let your brother live. Don't be flippant. Give water. You got to give life to your brother. Okay, Beth, does anyone want to argue on Beth's derivation?
With you.
Oh, but Land says, it doesn't say let your brother live, it says with you. You got to live. Then your brother could live. So Beth is looking at these words, let your brother live with you, and said, look, it's obvious. Let your brother live with you. You got to do what it takes to make your brother live. So Beth is interpreting these words to teach, you got to give the water. And Lance is saying, but it says with you. You got to get him out of convention.
With you. Live. Let him live with you. If you're alive, then he's going to be alive.
Oh, so that seems to mean that his life is secondary to yours. First, you got to live. And then once you're living, let him live with you. But you got to live first. So before I take any questions, Beth, first of all, who's right over here? Beth or Lance? Who got the better interpretation? Lance votes for himself. Yeah, that's great. Okay. The answer is you're both correct. I'll even tell you which sage says what. Ben Petura looks at the words with you and says the same as you. Let your brother live with you means you live, he lives, your life is no better than his life, same as you. So you have limited water and he's in distress, you give him half of your water. And if you both die, then both of you should die. But he should live with you equal to you. To Beth's point. That's what Ben Petura says. Ever heard of Ben Petura before? Ever met any Ben Petura Hebrew day schools? No, for some reason not. Ben Petura did not get any day schools. Ben Petura did not get any campus stuff. Oh, but who's next? 1 second before I get to any questions. Next one's Rabbi Akiva. Yeah, Akiva has some day schools. All right. Rabbi Akiva says, no, I disagree with you, Ben Petura. The words with you means secondary to you. Like, do you want to come to the park with me? Which means I'm going. You want to come with? That's secondary. Rabbi Akiva says, first you got to live, then let your brother live. But with you, you got to first, your priority is you. Then you could help your brother. So Rabbi Akiva would say, don't share the water. Here is an example of an argument in a derivation. Who's right, who's wrong? Both of these derivations are accurate. Both of these are valid derivations.
With you is in conjunction with, not secondary to.
That's up for debate. It can mean both. It can mean equal. It could also mean secondary. When someone says, I'm going to the mall, would you like to come with me? It means I'm going. Do you want to come in addition to me? Would you come with me? That's secondary. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong, Sheldon, but both interpretations are valid. Let's read that inside the text. All right. Text 3b, page 120. Where are we holding? Up. Toby, would you like to read? All right. Make sure the mic is on. I don't think so. Make sure the green light is there.
2 people were traveling in the desert, and one of them has only a flask of water. If he drinks it, he will reach town. If both of them drink it, they will both die. Ben Petura derived that both should drink from it and die, and it says, let your brother live with you. Rabbi Akiva said to him, let your brother live live with you, implying your life takes precedence over the life of another.
All right, this is an example of a debate. We don't have any received tradition what to do here. If it was received, it wouldn't be open for debate, correct? But because it's not received, we have to derive it. And the moment you go into the world of derivation, even within the framework that God gave us, there's so many tools and so many variations. Like over here, there is debate about this. Okay. Let me confuse you for 5 minutes. All right? Yes, yes.
One small question.
Yeah, sure.
Nowhere does it say how much water. It does say share the water, but it doesn't mean half and half.
Oh, okay. So your question is a very good question. And already once we get to practical Jewish law, that's one of the considerations. How much? But as a baseline, right? This is why the Talmud is not just one volume. Such a discussion can take pages and pages to hash out all the details. But here we have the general idea. Here's the debate in the derived. Okay. Now, I want to clarify one more area where I want to show you a debate in the Talmud and clarify why this is a big misconception. People don't understand what's happening in the debate. I want to give you some background. All right. There's a category of Judaism called received and derived. And for those of you who paid attention at the end of lesson 2, we spent 5 minutes discussing this. But this happens a lot in Judaism. Let me give you an example. We just spoke about this. On the first day of the holiday, you shall take the fruit of a hadar tree. Right? Take the fruit of a hadar tree. What fruit is this? The etrog. This for the holiday of Sukkot? Etrog. How do we know it's an etrog? Moses told us, received, which means the fruit of a hadar tree does not mean etrog. It can mean 20 different things. It can mean 100 things. It can mean 1,000 things. The only reason how we know it's an etrog is because Moses told us. Now, there's actually a debate in the Talmud. There's a debate. The Talmud questions, how do we know the fruit of hadar tree is indeed an etrog? The Talmud asks that question. Does that seem problematic with everything we've been talking about in this class? Oh, you're asking questions on a received law? It's received. What are you asking questions? And people look at that, and that's when they say, oh, no, received is also open for debate. Look at that. The rabbis debate, and they ask, how do we know it's an etrog? Maybe it's a pomegranate, maybe it's a quince, maybe it's a dragon fruit. What we have to realize is the rabbis do debate over received, but they're never debating over the facts. They're never debating, is this an etrog? Maybe it should be something else. Rather, what the rabbis sometimes try figuring out is the connection. We know this is an etrog, but how do we see the etrog in the words, the fruit of the hadar tree? How can we anchor the fact of an etrog and see it in the words? Because right now I don't see it in the words. Fruit of hadar tree, etrog. Okay, you tell me this is it. But how do I see that this is the hadar tree? This is called the derived and received. We already received it, but we also tried deriving. How do we know this is the case? Maimonides clarifies for us, if you study Talmud, you will find debates over received laws, but never over the facts. They're only trying to figure out how could we make this connection that when you read the words, the fruit of a hadar tree, oh, there's a hint, there's an anchor in the words of the Torah that point to us, oh, this means the etrog. Understand? So let's read the text. It's a little bit of a nuanced idea. Let's read the text. Where are we holding? Larry, text 4, page 121.
When you find Talmudic sages discussing, debating, and bringing proofs for any of these received explanations or others like it, they are not arguing over the validity of the nature of the received law, but rather how it might be derived from the biblical text. For example, the sages discuss the fruit of the hadar tree and ask, but maybe it refers to some fruit other than the etrog. They then bring proof from the words fruit and tree to indicate that it must be a fruit of a tree whose bark tastes the same as its fruit, which is true of the etrog. Another sage finds a hint for the etrog in the word hadar, explaining that the word hadar can also mean to dwell, indicating that it is a fruit that can dwell on the tree from one year to the next, which is a characteristic of the etrog. A third sage, noting the similarity between hadar and Greek idor, meaning water, say this indicates it is a fruit that grows, which is true of the etrog.
Keep on going. No, Larry, there's more to the text. Turn the page. There's more to go. There you go. Thank you.
Turning the page.
There you go.
Sages did not offer these derivations because they were not sure of what the Torah meant by the fruit of the hadar tree. From the days of Joshua until today, Jews took a lulav and an etrog year after year without debate. The sages were merely investigating the biblical allusions for this received tradition.
So Maimonides is guiding us to understand the methodology when rabbis argue law in the Talmud. You'll find the rabbis looking at a verse and saying, what fruit is this? Is it an etrog or is it a pomegranate? And you'll say, my whole Judaism is totally illegitimate. If rabbis 1,500 years after the giving of the Torah still don't know which fruit to take, I should claim that my Judaism comes from Sinai, comes from Moses. Look, they're arguing if an etrog is an etrog. What's the fruit of the hadar tree? And Maimonides says, no, they're never arguing over the received tradition. The etrog was always the etrog. They're rather debating and investigating the biblical allusion for this received tradition. It's a very important premise. If not, you study Talmud, you think the whole Judaism is up for debate. You have to understand, what are they debating? They're not debating the facts, they're only debating how could we find this connection. Let's put this up over here. In the derived received laws, debates are only about the derivation, but they never question the actual received laws. And I just want to walk through with you, because it's a little bit of a complex reasoning. What are the three different variations that the sages offer that the hadar tree, the fruit of a hadar tree, equals an etrog? So the first sage says, it says fruit of a tree. That teaches us it's a fruit of a tree whose bark tastes the same as its fruit. That's an etrog. If you taste the bark of an apple tree, it will not taste like an apple. If you would chew on the bark of an etrog tree, you would taste a citrus flavor, and that's one allusion that the fruit of a hadar tree actually points you to the etrog. Another sage says, no, I have a different one. The word hadar means dwell. It means beautiful, but if you change the vowelization, it spells dwelling. It's a fruit that can dwell on the tree from year to year. The etrog is one of those very unique fruits that don't have a season. It grows and stays on the tree and thrives year round. And the third sage says, no, the word hadar is similar to the Greek word hydor, which, by the way, we still have in English, right? Hydration, hydraulics, fire hydrant, all these are water-related words. Hydor means water, so the fruit of the hadar tree, a fruit that grows on much water, which is true of the etrog. But this is the important thing Maimonides tells us. Received never gets argued over. Derived, gesundheit, as we say in Yiddish. Go ahead and argue about derived. And there's one text, a beautiful text from the Mishnah, that sums up this value, this viewpoint in Judaism. I'll give you some background to this text. Rabbi Akiva, let's talk about Rabbi Akiva again, asked his teacher. Rabbi Akiva's teacher, his name was Rabbi Yehoshua. He goes to his teacher, asks Rabbi Yeshua, what's the law about this? He asks him a question, I don't know the law, what's the law? Rabbi Yeshua gives him an answer and teaches him a kal vachomer. Right, you remember kal vachomer? He gives him a derivation. So this is what Rabbi Akiva challenges his teacher. Let's read text 5. Where are we holding? All right, text 5, page 122.
Rabbi Akiva said, if it is a law passed down from Sinai, we will accept it. But if you are deriving it, it can be disproved.
There you go. Rabbi Akiva says, 1 second. You're telling me a law and you're giving me now a kal vachomer. If you tell me this law comes from your teacher, back from his teacher, going back to Moses, if this is a received law, I'm not going to challenge it. But if the whole premise for your ruling is the derivation, I actually have a way to disprove your derivation. And there you have this, the spirit. Received is closed. No debates. Derived, we could debate. Okay, let us now move on to legislated. Legislated, rabbis legislating laws, as we discussed, no problem. There could be debates there. Why? Because every rabbi can make their own decisions, and every local court, it's not just a rabbi, it's the leader of a court. A Jewish court of a city or of a community could make a legislation. Now, if the Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, makes a legislation, that's binding upon all Jews. That's not up for debate. But different communities made different legislations. There were Jews living in Babylonia. You had Jews living in Israel. The Jews in Israel, their rabbis could be making legislation for the Israeli Jewish community. The Jews in Babylonia don't have that legislation. So that's where it's totally appropriate, where we see diversity of opinion and differences within the tradition. Let's read text 6 on page 123. Thank you, Gail.
It's also possible for there to be debate with regard to the laws that were established by the prophets and sages of each generation, when they enacted measures to protect people from violating the Torah. One stage might prohibit something for a particular reason, whereas another one could disagree. You find this often in the Talmud where it says, this rabbi prohibited such and such because of this and that, and another rabbi did not issue this prohibition.
There you have it. Every court, when they make a legislation, it is binding upon the people under their jurisdiction, and it's totally appropriate. It's recorded a lot in the Mishnah, different communities, and different legislations, and that is an example of differences and variations within the Jewish tradition. And last week, we gave an example of a legislation. Rabbeinu Gershom, the leader of Ashkenazic Jewry, 900 years ago, banned, you guys remember? Polygamy, a man marrying more than one wife. And that's an example of a legislation which there is differences of opinion. Let's read text 7 on page 123. Go for it, Alan.
Rabbeinu Gershom declared excommunication upon a polygamous man, but his enactment did not take hold in all lands.
There we have it. Right there you see this diversity in Judaism. The Ashkenazic Jewry were under the jurisdiction of Rabbeinu Gershom and his court. And therefore, till today, it is halachically binding upon us. We are not allowed to marry. A man is not allowed to marry more than one wife. But the Sephardi communities from Spain, their rabbis did not make such a ban. Until today, halachically, according to Jewish law, there is no issue for them to marry more than one wife from the Jewish perspective. Let's talk about customs for a moment. Customs are also up for debate. Now, Alan, I'll let you read the next text because this was a short text. So hold on to your mic. Customs also, as Lance said, we won't even call it debate. There's a lot of differences of opinions. That's totally fine. Every family, every community has their own customs. There's a whole booklet, the customs of Amsterdam. Jews who grew up in Amsterdam, they had their own customs. Till today, there are Jews who associate. We come from Amsterdam, they have special customs. Within the Chabad community, we have Chabad customs. There's different communities. The Jews who came from Lithuania, Jews who come from Poland. People have different customs. Jews who come from Turkey. Everyone has their own customs, their own local traditions, which beautify their Judaism. You follow those customs, and that's where we see diversity in Judaism. Okay, here we have it. We just went through the four categories of Jewish tradition, and at least now we have clarity. Where is there debate? Where is there not debate? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have 10 minutes left to today's class, which means time-wise, but I have about 20 more minutes of material to go through with you. And I'll try to make it quick, but we are going to go a little bit over time. But I hope you're all at least enjoying yourself and seeing the value of what we're getting through today, of understanding the phenomenon of debate. Okay. Till now, we at least have clarity on where is there debate in Judaism, where is there not debate in Judaism. And contrary to popular belief, there's a lot of Judaism which is not open for debate, and there was never debate on it. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not appropriate. You don't argue something which is fact, right? Okay. So this was our opening question. Are there debates about facts? What does God say? And the answer was no. Anything that we know what God says, we know the answer. God, Moses told us, we know. The moment it's derived, that's where we have questions, because God didn't tell us. So we have to figure out the answer. And therefore we debate it. Does that settle the issue? Does that settle the issue? What do you say? Oh, it's derived. So God never told us. So we don't know what the answer is. Let's debate it.
Guidance.
What was that?
Definitive guidance on debates continue, I guess.
Here's the problem. There's still a problem. We don't look at the derived Torah as just human opinions. If it was human opinions, Gesundheit argument. We look at the derived oral Torah and say this is also God's. Remember, we spoke about this a lot in lesson 2, that the derived oral Torah is not just man's best guess of what God would say. And it's not just law based on the word of God. It is human discovery of the word of God, which means God does have an opinion on if you should share water or not. And we learned in lesson 2, God intentionally embedded the answer to each and every one of these unknown questions, unknown answers, unknown situations in the Torah, and left it up to us to find that answer using the tool of derivation. So there is still a fact over here. God has an opinion on should you share water or should you not share water, which really brings us back to square one. Even in the derived Torah, if it comes from God, we should have a definitive answer. How could there be debates? And if there are debates, that seems to imply we don't know what God has to say about that. But that's not what Judaism says. Judaism says the whole derived oral Torah also comes from God. So if you understand the problem over here, if it comes from God, it seems we're still arguing about debates because we also believe that the derived oral Torah is also divinely given. So therefore, we're not at square one, but we still have a fundamental problem. If it's the word of God, what does God say? Does God say give water or not give water? You understand the problem over here? Right? Does God say guilty or innocent? Kosher or treif? You're going to argue about it from today till tomorrow, but we need to know, what does God say? So you found the derivation this way, you found the derivation that way, but God has an opinion. That's the Jewish spirit. God embedded all the answers, just like each Sudoku board has an answer. Every single box has a number, which was planned that you should be putting an 8 in this box. It's not a free-for-all. It's not that, okay, let's just make a Sudoku board and leave a bunch of boxes empty. No, there's a plan. Somebody intentionally left answers waiting for you to discover it. God left all the answers to the questions. What does God have to say? Give water, not give water. And the same is true about all the thousands upon thousands of questions in the derived oral Torah where there's so much debate. But what does God say? Yes?
So there's a right and wrong answer. How do we know that?
Oh, there's a right and wrong answer. But even before we get to it, how do we know we got the right answer? If there are debates, that again undermines the whole legitimacy of this whole program. Right? If this is man's effort to discover the word of God and we come to different conclusions, it seems we're back to square one. We really don't have God's opinion on this. Which this really leads us to learn a much more deeper understanding into the nature of debates and dissenting opinions in the Talmud. And this is going to be a little bit of a paradigm shift. Right? It's a little bit mind-blowing, this idea. Let us read a piece of the Talmud. Text 9a, all right, just look at the Mike Allen, page 125. All right, this is a great text. Let's take this in. Go ahead.
Some sages rule that an object is ritually impure, and others rule that it is pure. Some forbid, while others permit. Some disqualify, while others declare fit. A person might ask, why study Torah under such circumstances? The verse therefore says, all were given from one shepherd. One God gave them. One leader communicated them from the mouth of God. As it is written, and God spoke all these words.
All right. The Talmud itself says somebody can come along, start studying Talmud, and just get totally turned up. I don't know what's going on over here. This is Jewish law. Nobody even knows what they're talking about. Everybody has a different opinion. I should study this. This is normal. This is serious. So the Talmud says, don't worry. Nobody's wrong. This all comes from the same God, from the same Moses, the same one people. Even the opposite opinions, they're both God's opinion. God says give water, and God says don't give water. Now, how does that work? We'll get to that in a moment. But this is the first premise. When you find a debate in Judaism, if it's recorded in the Talmud, that means both opinions are fully legitimate. When Ben Petura says give water, Rabbi Akiva says don't give water, neither of them are wrong. They're both right. They're both telling you the word of God. And what's amazing is Let's read this next piece of a medrash. Let's read this next text. All right, I'll help you out over here. Let's read text 9b, Michael. We'll get back at you. All right, let's read this next text, and we'll keep on discovering on this theme over here.
For each law that God told Moses, he would enumerate 49 arguments for ruling that the object was ritually pure, 49 arguments for ruling that the object was ritually impure.
This is an unbelievable text over here. When Moses went up onto the mountain to get the Torah from God, God gave Moses a sampling of how the derived Torah works. And God gave Moses, thank you, next. God gave Moses a scenario where God did not tell Moses the answer, right? For example, God gave the question of give water, not give water. And God himself showed Moses how there's 49 different derivations for this way and 49 derivations for the other way. And God did not even give Moses the final answer. What does this show you? When you find differences of opinion in Jewish law, again, it's not that one got it right, one got it wrong. They're both right. Multiple divergent opinions don't start with the human mind. This is not a fault of humans trying to figure things out, that one will get a good derivation, the other one will get a bad derivation, but they actually all, the differences of opinion come from God himself, which means God himself put into the Torah that there's a way to look at the Torah and derive give water, and there's a way to look at the Torah and derive don't give water. And let's read one more text on this theme, that it comes from God, text 9c. Go for it, Pam, page 126.
For 3 years, there was a dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the former asserting the halacha is in agreement with our views, and the latter contended the halacha is in agreement with our views. The heavenly voice declared, these and these are the words of the living God.
Oh, the Academy of Hillel and the Academy of Shammai were known to have very different models of learning, and they each came to very different derivations all throughout Jewish law. They were once debating an issue for 3 years. So many times debates were figured out simply by a lot of hashing it back and forth until one side agreed with the other side. Many times there's a debate like this one. They're debating it for 3 years, and they still are holding, right? Finally, a heaven voice comes and says, both these and these are the words of the living God. You're both right. You see, people look at Talmudic debate and think it's a bug. It's a bug in the system. Unfortunately, you get humans too involved, you're going to have debates. That's just the problem. So people think it's like a negative thing. It's a bug in the system. And what Judaism comes and says is, no, debates are not a bug, it's a feature. It's actually a beautiful part of Judaism. There's something so profound and so beautiful and so enriching about the fact that we debate everything. But what's profound about that? Right? And not only what's profound, but how does it even make sense? God says give water and don't give water. Good luck fulfilling that. Right? How do you do that? How do you follow what God wants? So let's read this text. Text 10. This is a very deep text. You know, this is like that. We'll read it once, but it's the type of text you got to read a few times and think about it. This is a great text from the Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Yehuda Levi. By the way, one of my forebears, my great-great-grandfather, whatever, however many generations you go back. All right, so I love reading something from Isaiah over here. So he's a great scholar, great Jewish philosopher, the leader of the Prague Jewish community, creator of the golem. Right, you've heard of the legend of the golem? If any of you need a golem, I can make you a golem. I got family connections. All right, Jeff, I'm just kidding. I have no clue how to make a golem. Jeff, go ahead. Text 10, page 127.
It is not possible for anything in this world to have just one aspect to it. Even if something is ritually impure, it must contain an aspect of ritual purity. And when something is ritually pure, it must have an aspect of ritual impurity. One feature of a particular case can elicit a verdict of innocent, and another feature a verdict of guilt. One facet of a particular item or action can indicate permitted, while another facet indicates prohibited. The same applies with regard to an item or action that is either valid or invalid. This is true in general for the world we inhabit, where objects are comprised of multiple elements. One can say about a tree that it is comprised of water, and another can say it is comprised of oxygen, and both are speaking truth. When someone declares an item ritually pure and presents arguments to prove it, this person has demonstrated only one aspect of reality. Similarly, When one declares it ritually impure, it reflects only one aspect of reality. There is no doubt, however, that for the purpose of practical halakha, one aspect is more important than the other. Although God created things with multiple facets, one of them is more significant, and this is what determines the actual halakha. Still, do not say that the less significant aspects are wholly unimportant. This is not true. For when we hear all of the opinions, we comprehend the item in its totality, with all of its features and components, as spelled out in the Torah. It is only with regard to the practical final ruling that one feature outweighs the others.
Such a profound text over here. But let's explain a little bit. Everything in this world, everything, nothing in this world is so simple, straightforward. Everything is always a blend of many different elements. I'll give you an example for this. I got a question for you. Is an apple healthy? Is it nutritious or poisonous or dangerous? What did you say? Healthy, right? Okay. We all know apples are healthy. But do any of you know, you could look this up, it's true. Apple seeds have cyanide in them. You know that, okay. Is cyanide healthy or not? Do we say don't eat apples because there's poison in there? We don't say that. Well, we don't eat seeds, but if you eat seeds, there's not a problem. You're not going to the hospital. So the real truth is, if somebody says there's poison in apples, there's a certain truth to it. Are they wrong about that? And if somebody says apples are so healthy, so nutritious, are they wrong? No. They're both right. Why are they both right? Because it's both true. Now, just by the way, the fact is, the reason why the cyanide in apple seeds are not something to worry about is because the toxicity level, the volume of cyanide is so low that it doesn't have high enough of a toxicity level to be dangerous to the human body. And the human body is able to totally deal with that type of cyanide. It doesn't even pose any type of threat. You would have to have hundreds and hundreds of apple seeds in a very short amount of time to even start even having to worry about any type of danger. But the fact is, there is poison in apple seeds. There is poison. It's one of the natural sources of cyanide. Fascinating, no? That just shows you everything in life is more complex. Same thing about law. Nobody is ever 100% guilty. There's an element of guilt. There's also an element of innocence. Nothing is ever totally kosher, totally treif. Nothing is ever totally good, totally bad. No person is ever totally good, totally bad. From this point of view, it's a good thing. From this point of view, it's a bad thing. By the way, this is a great lesson for today, like in the world of politics. Everything is so monolithic. Good or bad, evil, totally amazing. This is the best thing since sliced bread. Calm down. Everything is a mix of everything. From this perspective, it's good. From this perspective, it's bad. When you look at law, what's the final law? What's an apple? Healthy or dangerous? The final line is it's healthy. Why? Because we have to choose. What's the most predominant element over here? Which element outweighs the other element? Does the nutritious element outweigh the danger, the poison, or the opposite? And that's how you make a law. That's how you make the final law. But there's so much value in investigating the different elements in this as well. So when you study Talmud, you could think about this. Today you could find a book, you could buy a set of Jewish law. It's not a lot of volumes, and you have all the final, there's no debates. You know the law about everything. You will know what to do when you are in a desert and you have water, you got to give it to another person because they're in distress. So why, you can think to yourself, why go and buy Talmud, 36 volumes, and break my head over debate? Who cares what they debated? I know the law now. And the answer is debates are not a bug, it's a feature. There's so much to learn from the debates because the debates tell you the truth of the matter. The Torah is not just telling you what to do, it is teaching you the truth about every single case that Torah teaches you about. When you find a debate, they're both true. From a certain perspective, you should give water and die. Yeah, die, but give your brother water. And that truth, that comes from God. That's a truth. You have to, even if that's not the law, that's a truth. And from a different perspective, you have to live first. And that is also a truth. The question is, which one is more important? So Jewish law has to figure out which is the predominant element, and that becomes the law. But this doesn't undermine the fact that every opinion is valid and gives us a deeper and rich understanding of the topic at hand. You know, this is the difference between 2D and 3D. A 2D cartoon movie is flat. It's a flat image. Today, nobody makes any more 2D movies. Am I correct about that? Today, everything's 3D. The moment we had the technology to make a 3D movie, make 3D movies. Why is that? Because 2Ds are flat. You only get one perspective. 3D is so much richer because it's much more, because you're getting more than one perspective. That's 3D, three-dimensional. Arguments give us that enriched understanding of this. You know, this is why, and okay, we're really running low on time. This is why I want to conclude to you with one more thought and then a final thought, and I'll leave you with some homework. This is why in Judaism, the Torah is compared to a song. You know, one person singing a song is nice, but if you have a good choir who knows how to sing a song, it's beautiful. What's the beauty of a song, of a choir? Not just they have more than one voice, but they have different voices. Different voices, different pitches, and then harmonize. Harmony is such a fascinating thing because two people are singing a song totally off key. They're not singing the same song. And yet they complement each other so beautifully. The different sounds actually create a much more beautiful understanding, a much more beautiful model of this issue. So when you see debates in the Torah, don't say, wow, this is so unfortunate the rabbis couldn't figure anything out. This is a song, it's a symphony. Listen to the beautiful music. Let's read text 11 on page 129. Where are we holding over here? Okay, go ahead. Stuart. Or whatever, whichever one of you.
The Torah is called a melody. The beauty of melody is when the sounds are different from each other. This is the primary pleasantness of song. One who swims in the sea of Talmud will find pleasure in each of its different sounds.
The more you get to know Judaism, the more you see the beauty within the diversity. It's not a cacophony, is that how you pronounce it? Right? It's not noise, it's not a mess. It's actually all the divergent opinions are a beautiful song. Okay, there's one part of the class that we did not cover yet, which is how do we ultimately resolve debates? We're going to read one text, and that's going to finish the class, but I'm going to leave you with some homework to study on your own text 13 and text 14. This is where Maimonides speaks about practically how laws were resolved. How did they figure out what is the final halacha? But let's read text 12, and then we're going to conclude with that. Text 12, page 130.
For each law that God told Moses, he would enumerate 49 arguments for ruling that an object was ritually pure, and 49 arguments for ruling that the object was ritually impure. Moses said before him, Master of the universe, how will we be able to reach the practical conclusion? God responded, follow the majority. If the majority rules it is ritually impure, it is impure. If the majority rules pure, it is pure.
There you have it. In Judaism, the model is Moses himself asked this to God. You remember we read the text that God himself gave Moses a sampling of how you could use 49 different derivations to prove this way, 49 different derivations to do the other way. Moses said, God, this is a very confusing system. What do we do? Give water, don't give water. And God said, you follow majority. No problem. There could be debates, and the debates have a lot of value. We debate it. We respect the process of debating. But then you go to the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, and you take a vote. Whatever the majority says becomes law. And that is the model up until today of Judaism. Now, for a more practical understanding of how that would work, including once there was no Sanhedrin, read text 13 and read text 14 from Maimonides. And with that, we conclude today's class about debate. Thank you all so much for hanging along over here with us. Next week, lesson 5 is called The More Things Change. What is the process of Judaism changing through time? That's a very important question as well. Thank you all so much for joining us on this very auspicious day. I want to wish you all, we should only have simchas, more mazel, and I look forward to seeing you. Okay, a very important announcement before any of you go. If my new son's bris is on time, it will be next week Wednesday. So if it is next week Wednesday, class is going to be postponed, but that still means you got something to show up to. We'll be having right? We're still gonna have a bris, and it's customary that all family and friends who are like family should join. It will be our greatest honor for you to join the bris. So even if it's not on time, of course, we're going to be sending out all the information as soon as we have it finalized. And I hope that you could join us for the bris, and we give the baby a name. It's such a beautiful celebration. So stay tuned. I'll definitely be sending out emails with any updates. If class will be on schedule, if we'll be doing the bris next Wednesday. But stay tuned for that. All right, then. I think that's all the announcements for tonight. Yes, I'll definitely do that. Okay, absolutely. Ooh. Okay, wonderful. Have a great night, everyone.